Dennis Reynolds has always told us who he is. A master of seduction, a golden god, a five-star man. And now the rest of us have offered some other descriptors too. Manipulative, controlling, bastard man. Because underneath all that confidence, we see a man who's obsessed with his appearance, deeply sensitive to criticism and rejection, and capable of spectacular rage. So what's going on with Dennis Reynolds? Is he a narcissist? Or could some of what we're seeing be rooted in something else? With It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia returning for its 18th season, I figured there's no time like the present to give Dennis Reynolds a psych exam. Welcome to Culture Alchemy. I'm Antoinette. And today I'm joined by one of my faves. You know him, you love, psychologist and host of Therapy Without the Couch, Dr. Todd Giardina. Welcome back, Dr. G.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Great conversations with you.
I love talking to you. And let me just say, Dr. G, the last time you were on the show, we talked about two of Euphoria's most complex characters, right? Nate and Cassie. But today, Doctor, we may be venturing into entirely new psychological territory.
Yes.
Okay. So we're talking Dennis Reynolds. And as a reminder, for those who are not familiar, he's a white male, I'm going to say in his 40s, right? He's a co-owner and occasional bartender at Patty's Pub in South Philly. He's a twin brother to Deandra Reynolds. He was raised by Frank Reynolds, although we eventually find out that Frank isn't actually his biological father. He's also a Penn U grad. He's perpetually single, and he spent, I would say, the better part of 2 decades pursuing women with a now infamous seduction system called the D.E.N.N.I.S system, maintaining / obsessing over his appearance and reminding everyone that he is indeed a golden god. So, Dr. G, with that little intro, when we look at Dennis as a whole, what stands out to you about him?
Yeah, so if we want to sum up Dennis Reynolds, the short version of this podcast is he's an insecure narcissist. That's what we're dealing with. Because you've got the duality here, right? On the one hand, he thinks he is the smartest guy in the room, best looking guy in the room, the one all the women are clamoring to get to. But then he's always frustrated with the people around him. If he's so amazing, why is he hanging out with this crowd? If he's so desirable, why is he always single? And why does he have to use the D.E.N.N.I.S system to hook women? Why does he have to take them out on a boat because of the implication? Why must he go to these lengths, right? Sure. So he's not who he thinks he is, and he knows it, but he's almost trying to convince everybody of this narrative to make it true.
Yes. And I'm so glad you mentioned, you hit all the classics. The implication is one of the big ones, right? Where we finally see a little bit of that terrifying inner psyche. And as you said, maybe this is the easiest case ever. So classic narcissism here, right? Obviously, there's some narcissistic traits for sure.
Right.
And some people have said he's got something called narcissistic personality disorder. So what is the difference between somebody who has narcissistic traits and someone who actually has MPD?
Right. So narcissistic personality disorder is not a diagnosis I make often, so I can't rattle off all the symptoms off the top of my head. But what happens with this therapy talk and therapy speak and people getting kind of part of the information is you jump to the extreme, right? Antoinette, you and I both probably have one symptom of every diagnosable mental health disorder. That doesn't mean we have all the mental health disorders. Just like right now, I'll bet either one of us has a symptom of having the Ebola virus or having prostate cancer or ovarian cancer. If you have GI distress, you might have the symptom of a lot of things. So this is where we get stuck on taking a symptom and making it a whole thing. And it's more fun to be dramatic and aggrandize and say, oh my God, I am such a psychopath. I can't believe I just did that. Okay, well, you did something that was maybe, and psychopath isn't the term we use anymore, maybe antisocial, but doing one action or having one thought does not make you the thing. And when we talk about a diagnosable condition, especially something like a personality disorder, which is very pervasive through your lifetime, that means that you have multiple symptoms and it's kind of your base operating system. It's not a glitch. It's not a one-time action. It's not a in this moment, I was making it all about me on my birthday, so I'm a narcissist, right? Traits versus diagnosable condition. Pieces of the puzzle versus the whole puzzle.
Oh, that's a great way of framing it. So it's kind of like you're looking for like a constellation of things. So then let's think about this. Dennis walks, I mean, I don't know if he would actually walk into your office, but let's say he walks into your office and for whatever reason decides he wants to work with you. Based on everything that you said and everything that we're hearing, how seriously would you be considering narcissistic personality disorder as an explanation? Like what would you need to see to be able to say that this is probably fitting?
So yeah, I'm looking at like, how does he perceive himself in relation to others? And you're looking for patterns and, like you said, pervasiveness. Is it in all your relationships? Is it across your lifespan you feel this way? Does he ever show any sense of, like, a big one I would see, because I've treated versions of this, he would challenge every statement of mine. He would try to let me know that he actually knows more than me. He would point out that I had made one little grammatical error in speaking and use that to point out that, well, obviously I hold no credibility in the room. So there would be efforts to make himself bigger. There would be stories told where he's always the hero or the victim, but never the villain, right? Like you look for, it's not isolated. It's the context is everywhere. And that's the main thing that I would be looking at.
Okay, so based on what you just said, I think we do see evidence of some of this throughout the series, right? And in fact, I think there's even an episode where he's sitting with a therapist and he actually questions her credentials, right? Like the school she went to. So
yeah, I went to a better school than you. Yeah.
Right. LaSalle, like, so like it's, right. So very interesting. Okay. So
and
then
she diagnoses him, by the way, with borderline personality. And so this is where it gets tricky because there's some of these diagnoses that are very hard to make on first glance with somebody. I went and played around on the internet before this recording to see, okay, what am I on the right track? What do other people say? And so a confusing misdiagnosis, borderline personality is this much maligned personality disorder that often comes up in tumultuous romantic relationships. They're like, I love you so much, please get away from me. How could you do this to me? I need you in my life. This like strong push pull. So it's often thrown out there as like a way to dismiss a partner when he or she hurts you, that you're borderline. Okay. What somebody reminded me as I was preparing for this, one of the very early, not early, but like mid seasons, we find out that apart from the stuff with his parents, Dennis was molested in his youth. And so from that traumatic incident, we could say that he has something called complex PTSD, which looks the same as borderline personality disorder in a lot of its presentation. A sort of fluid sense of self, moments of very high self-esteem and very low self-esteem, doing things sort of recklessly, constantly wanting people's praise and adulation, but kind of having detachment and distance and no real connection with people, erratic outbursts when you're not being validated. So that might be actually a better diagnosis than borderline personality for Dennis Reynolds.
Interesting. Okay, I'm glad you brought up his background because I was going to say this is where the plot thickens, right? Because we do know that some really adverse childhood experiences and and if we stop and maybe instead of asking what's wrong with him, we say, what happened to him? You just rattled off a few that I think are extremely significant. He doesn't think he was abused, which is kind of interesting, but we know in his own history, at minimum, he has abused alcohol. He's dabbled occasionally in crack use, right? We know that much. He's got a completely dysfunctional family system, right? And obviously, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg with him that we know, right? So I guess what I'm curious about, because you did mention that this could be complex PTSD. I wonder, because Dennis himself would not likely say that the sexual encounter, and that's probably the word he would even use with his librarian, wasn't something that, it wasn't rape for him. It wasn't molestation for him. He wouldn't use those words. So is it possible that someone could still have complex PTSD, even if they didn't recognize those experiences as being negative? Yeah?
Yeah, and that's where complex PTSD is so complicated, because in contrast to what most people envision of PTSD, an assault, combat experience, a near-death experience. It's this big flashbulb moment. There's a before and an after. But complex PTSD is almost always related to relationships and boundary violations. So the parent who loves me also mistreats me. An authority figure who protects me also harms me. So it sort of confuses the wiring. And thusly, it can be something that you don't even remember the origin story. Many people who had troubling childhood experiences that rewire their way of perceiving adult interactions in relationships, they may not point to that. They think, oh, yeah, my parents fought sometimes, or sometimes I got in trouble, because it's lots of little things. It's death by a thousand cuts. The time my house almost burned down, like, yeah, everybody remembers that. That's clearly a before and after, right? But this is sort of an always, and it can make you believe, oh, that's how it works. Yes, adults sometimes hug you and sometimes slap you. The people who protect you sometimes touch you in an uncomfortable way. That's just what it is. And so that's where you can be set on a certain path and not even acknowledge it as like harmful. It just is.
Okay, that's really, really fascinating then. Okay, so Dennis then, if we know that he's had a number of different experiences in childhood that were really significant markers, if we look at him now as an adult and we see the behaviors now, he had a very traumatic childhood, fair to say. Well, his parenting leaves a lot to be desired. His mother was completely negligent. His father, as I just mentioned multiple times, is Frank Reynolds. And then what does that mean then for someone like Dennis? Like, what kind of adaptations might develop in someone who experienced that kind of parenting or just that kind of instability, I guess, full stop, early in life?
So looking at, not generalizing, but looking at Dennis Reynolds specifically, he's always seeking power. And so maybe there were times he felt powerless. So I want to be in power. The librarian was an older woman, an adult. So he's always pursuing younger women. So he's the one in power of the sexual dynamic. He always wants wealth and wants to set himself apart as I am rich. I drive a Range Rover. I'm not one of you. So he identifies as this instead of that to kind of contrast. And then the biggest one is that he always has this sense of superiority. I'm the smartest one in the room. Everybody's an idiot. And that can come from a sense of it's called being parentified. I need to hurry up and grow up real quick because the adults don't seem to be adulting. So I guess I'll take charge. And then let's throw in one more wrinkle of he has a twin sister. And so having a twin, separate from any other type of sibling, but right there's an immediate comparison. So he has to be the masculine to her feminine, or he has to be the one who's taking care of her and then he sets it apart, right? Like he mocks her in a way that some of the early episodes, you don't even realize that they're related, let alone twins. It's like, ooh, get away from me. You're othered, right?
Yeah. And you said that control is definitely an issue for this man, right? And we can see it demonstrated in his infamous D.E.N.N.I.S system. Let's talk about the D.E.N.N.I.S system because I'd like to get your take on this, and maybe this could be helpful to people as well who are out there dating right now who might encounter a Dennis Reynolds, right? So let's break down the D.E.N.N.I.S system, right? The D.E.N.N.I.S system is the 6-step seduction strategy introduced in season 5. And so the D.E.N.N.I.S system, again, for the unacquainted, he's got D, demonstrating his value. E, engaging physically. N, nurturing dependence, followed swiftly by neglecting emotionally, then inspiring hope, and finally separating entirely. So when you look at the D.E.N.N.I.S system, Dr. G, what does it tell you about how Dennis may understand intimacy?
Yeah, he's not here for it. He sees women in relationships as a commodity or as something disposable. This is laying a trap. This is a process. This is how do you convert animal parts into baloney? This is nothing. There's no feeling there. This is just step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, result, and it works. And the scary thing is, this would work on a lot of people in the actual real world. This isn't something just silly for a show. There's research behind a lot of this. And it's, the show's meant to mock those people, the pickup artist guy, that guy who wore like the weird velvet cape or whatever was popular online or at some point. But there is something to it. I've had many of my single women come in talking about how they got the negging behavior that guys were using a few years ago. And so folks who don't know, that's where you go up to a woman and you simultaneously show her attention and compliment her, but also kind of subtly insult her. So now she's provoked to pay attention to you, but then she also feels like she needs to get the full compliment. So then she needs to work harder to get your attention. So nothing against you, Antoinette, but I would say, man, for a girl with your skin complexion, you're able to pull off that blouse. I'm surprised. And so now, did I just say something nice about you or something horrible? And now you're confused and it creates this hook. Instead of saying, hi, nice to meet you, you just look like somebody with a friendly face. That's not memorable. And so what Dennis is showing us is that toxicity is a great way to get a hook in somebody. But yeah, he doesn't care about his reputation. He doesn't care about people's feelings. He doesn't care about building a long-term relationship. He's just here for the quickie.
Yeah. Yeah. And the negging still happens,
Yeah.
Very prevalent. And ask anybody who's out there dating right now, I think people are starting to pick up on these old school pickup artistry systems are coming back again. Maybe it's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, that's
so I won't go too far off, but yeah, we do still see that. There's part of the system that I think is also very prevalent today, which is the attention, then the withdrawal. So it's like the part of the system I think he talks a lot about is he engages you physically, he nurtures your dependence, and then he neglects you emotionally. Why would somebody give you affection and then withdraw it? What are they trying to do when they're doing that?
And so what we're doing there is we're trying to create a chase. We're trying to create what's called an inconsistent reward system. So if every time I call you, you answer, and if every time you text me, I answer, that's stable, that's predictable, that calms the nervous system. That's what you want in a partner, in a relationship. Right. But that's flat. That's boring. If every third time I pick up your call, and then sometimes every other time, and then sometimes not at all, now you don't know. And so this is why people gamble. This is why people get hooked on playing slot machines, because sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes when you post something on TikTok or Instagram, it gets 1,000 likes and sometimes only 3. And now you need to figure out why. So it makes you try harder and re-engage with the system. Is this inconsistent reward pattern. And it creates a sense of an addiction. It creates this uncertainty. So you keep trying. If I'm always there, you don't need to pursue me because I'm always there. But sometimes I'm not there. So now you need to try harder and maybe show your value higher than the other person. And now I've got you in this toxic cycle. The scary part is that stereotypically, everybody listening to this is picturing that the guy's doing this to the girl and there's still a dynamic. However, women sort of enjoy the reverse of it. And this is where we both parties are caught up in the cycle. I had a woman I was speaking to just 2 days ago, and she is trying to provoke a fight with her sort of boyfriend, maybe not, because she feels like they're just here. And she wants him to fight for her. She wants him to chase her. So she's saying things like, well, maybe we should just break up. And she wants him to scream and say, I need you. She wants him to double down his efforts. If he's just there every day holding her hand, looking at her, she's like, I don't feel like you really love me. I think you're just here. But if he's willing to tear his hair out for her, then it's a real show of, you drive me nuts, woman, but I have to be with you. So sometimes either side can play into this. The guy knows that he can get the girl curious, confused, insecure, but the girl sometimes needs to make the guy push past his comfort level and say, you're driving me nuts, but I'll do all this for you. I want you so badly. Only you.
I've seen many people do this. I've seen women do it. I've seen men do it. And I've seen some people get bored when there isn't enough back and forth. It's too safe for them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's too
vanilla.
safe.
I want a thrill. I remind everybody, like, do you want passion or do you want consistency? And those two things don't go together. And Esther Perel does a whole great thing about this. And I'm not going to steal her stuff, but somebody go listen to Esther Perel's podcast about the need for jealousy in a relationship. We need a little push-pull.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I totally agree. And I love Esther Perel as well.
Let's take another pivot, but we also need to lump in the other likely diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder, or some episodes dabble with full-blown psychopathic serial killer.
Yep. Yep.
So, I mean,
Yep.
so I'm not going to spoil it. I watched the new 2 episodes last night just to be
Okay.
ready for today. But at one point, Dennis is about to do something horrific to a person's body. And he goes, how can I do this? I don't have my tools. My tools. He has tools for this occasion. He has a collection of sex tapes and all kinds of video equipment. The implication is that he has or will harm people. At one point, they do the Making Dennis Reynolds a Murderer
Yes.
episode, and they talk about how he ripped the head off several crows as a child as an experiment. So that's part of the psychopathic triad, that he is disregard for animals and harming animals as a child. So
Yes.
we play around with this. We dabble as maybe he's a serial killer, maybe he's a psychopath, maybe he has something called ASPD.
Oh, you're so right, because all these memories are flooding back to me now. He also doesn't like animals, generally speaking, hates dogs, right? We saw that.
Yeah.
He loves the skins, right? He's got a backup plan for the smell, all these things, really calculated that way. And I just remembered as you were talking, Dr. G, that not just one clinician has diagnosed him. He actually got diagnosed in another episode. There was the Psycho Pete episode later on, when he's trying to figure out how to get meds for Psycho Pete. He ends up walking out with a diagnosis of a borderline personality disorder from another doctor, meds for that. So, yeah, he's an interesting case, that's for sure. I want to ask a couple of follow-up questions about how do we take what we're learning about Dennis and implement some of this in our real lives? Because obviously, Dennis, as you said, he's quite a character. He's exaggerated, and there's comedy around what he's doing. But I do think if someone is dating somebody like a Dennis, there might be some things that they might want to look out for. I know this is something that you've talked to a lot of clients about, right? Who are maybe going through relationship challenges. And how would you advise someone if they're, the early stages of dating somebody, what kind of early warning signs would you look out for if somebody may have some of the control issues or broader issues that Dennis displays?
Yeah. And that is stuff that we can pick up pretty early on, with a big caveat, disclaimer, and asterisk here, that if he were some of these things we're talking about, the narcissist, not so much, but if borderline or the antisocial, either one of those, there can be a portrayal of something you're not. There can be a catfishing element. There can be I'm giving you this because I know that's what you want, and then I'm going to bait and switch. So big asterisk there. Yeah, I always want to know, how does the person you're on a date with treat the staff at a restaurant? Do they feel superior, or do they treat them with respect? If you're an animal lover, which you don't have to be, but how do they treat your animal or other dogs on the street or babies? I want to know, do they only talk about themselves, or do they engage you? Do they ask questions about you, or do they ask sort of empty questions that then allow them to sort of nod and veer off? I want to know, do they seem rigid, and if their steak is not cooked properly, how do they respond to that? How do you handle adversity? What happens if I say, hey, instead of walking left, let's go right? Hey, I know you were planning on going to this bar, but I want to go to this other place where my friend is. How do you handle that? So there could be lots of little tests that we can throw out there that I don't like to set people up. I don't believe in true tests, but I do believe in gathering data, and it's right there. And yeah, how do you treat my friends? If I introduce you to my friend, if we bump into them casually, will you pay them attention, or are you only paying me attention because you think you're only going to sleep with me? So can you show value in knowing people in my world? Lots of little things we can tug for there that are what I call pink flags, right? Maybe somebody's having a bad day. Maybe he's irritable with the waitstaff because he's been having a rough day. Maybe he didn't like dogs because the dog bit him. We don't know your story yet. Okay. So all just notes, but then we start to look for patterns every time, always, every date. Now I'm kind of seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah. The patterns again, the patterns, right? And so again, if you're seeing someone maybe on the first date who seems to be doing some of this stuff, you might go, well, do you have enough data? Is that someone that maybe you might go, let's see what a second date looks like?
And then secondarily, the other thing I remind everybody is, if we're talking about pink or red flags, how many green flags do they have? So this person made me feel so seen, or I had so much fun, or they were so attractive, or they're such a great dancer, or they were blah, blah. So I need to know why you're going back in for more. Because sometimes if you've got neutral and pink flags, well, then if it's just that, that's not selling me. But I want to know that this person was so amazing that I'm going to give them a second shot. Maybe they were having a bad day, right?
Right. Yeah.
A weird thing about the Dennis Reynolds character, it's so easy to see him as a stereotype, a caricature, but there's one episode, I think this all happened in the same episode, if I remember, but he freaks out about his Tesla, which is actually based on a real experience one of the actors and writers had, that he can't get into his Tesla because of the key or the digital lock or whatever. And then he also is going to a barista, to a coffee shop, and he has to order on an app instead of just talking to the person. And his reaction to both of those, while it's very Dennis, feels very relatable. Like, if you saw me in a coffee shop and I'm already kind of frustrated, and instead of talking to the barista, I have to order on, I might raise my voice too. And I hope you don't see that as me always, but that's just a human reaction to that. He has if you're talking about something serious and your friends are like, hey, let's go bird fishing, or let's go, like, whatever, some of the stuff Charlie says, I would be like, you're an idiot. So he does have moments that we can all relate to. And again, this is where we have those traits. There are moments that his reactions are kind of appropriate, or maybe not sign of a disorder.
You're so right, actually, because if I look at him in the context of the whole gang, right? He's right. He says things that actually I can relate to. Want to go hunting for goblins and ghouls? Not really.
Right. Yeah. What are you talking about? What?
It's true. It's true.
Right. You should be frustrated by that. But that comes back to the question of, why is Dennis, if he's such a golden god, why are these your people? Where's your pen crowd? Where's your other people who drive Range Rovers? What are you doing here? Yeah. And that's what you see with a lot of people. And that's something that also for dating purposes, has somebody position themselves so they seem to be the leader of the pack or the smartest person in the group or whatever. But who's your group? Like, if you're not confident enough to be with other kind of people who challenge you, if you position yourself as some kind of stereotypical leader of an 80s gang where, like, you're the only one to bring in, everybody else is idiots, that doesn't really set you apart. You cast the characters that way to make yourself relatively appear superior.
Oh my gosh, great take. Yes, great take. Because at one point in time, all of them go back for their high school reunion, and we see how people, engage with him, and his. Yeah. He seems delusional about even how he presented himself back then, right? Like, it's like he was kind of hanging around with that bad crowd, quote unquote. So it's interesting that he's still doing that. So you're
rewriting history, change the narrative. Yeah. And we all talk about manifesting and, like, believing and telling people, you should say, I am wealthy instead of I'm going to have money one day. There's some element to that. But yeah, he's borderline gaslighting people. And if he is narcissistic, he has narcissistic personality, then at some point he might even get lost in his own sauce. He can't tell if he's lying anymore or if it's just, I don't know, trying to make it happen for himself,
Yeah.
He might not perceive it as malicious. It's just, we'll figure it out as we get there.
Yeah. And I know he talks about not having feelings, like he stopped having feelings, right? So, like, he is also probably a little bit numb, I guess, to what he's doing. So if somebody like Dennis were to walk into your office, and again, I don't know under what circumstances he would be walking into your office, but let's say he does. We spent a lot of time today talking about Dennis and trying to understand his psyche, but understanding him is one thing. And now I want to take it to your office and talk about, what do you do with him when he gets there? Do you think Dennis or someone like him could change? What does genuine growth look like for Dennis Reynolds?
Yeah, and that's a tough one because it means first breaking down some of the defense mechanisms that have been propping him up, right? Challenging some of his beliefs. So to be frank, somebody like him probably, even if they started therapy, they would bail at some point. And they would find an excuse to say that my fees were too high, or I wasn't skilled enough, or I was wasting their time, something that paints them differently. But yeah, first we got to break down some of the defenses and say, how is this serving you? Is this maybe protecting you, but at a cost? You're not having fulfilling relationships. You're not meeting your level of success. I would probably play into his narcissism and his end goal driven sense of self, but try to steer it so it benefits those around him. So instead of the Dennis system, I might point out, if you're just nice to women, they might sleep with you anyway. You don't have to do this whole thing. What if you were just nice? What if you actually listened? That might do it. And so then maybe there's a less harmful way. Maybe there's a way where both parties can benefit. If he was actually in a relationship, I would point out similar things. And I have done that with people who have narcissistic traits. Instead of saying, maybe you should listen to your wife, I'll say, dude, maybe if you listen to your wife, she'll get off your ass about things and you can go golfing more. And see, I'm going to make it about your end goal, but now the wife is getting a nicer you. So win-win. So even if it's not out of genuine caring, it's the beginning of better behavior. And then the last thing that we would do if he stuck around long enough is finally get to that origin. Where did you hurt? Like, why do you feel you need to have this duality of this? Like, you're always pissed off at everybody in the world and you're owed more, but then you're overcompensating. Like, why do you have to have this perfect body? Why do you have to have this Range Rover? Why do you have to pursue something? Like, could we maybe drop that? Where does that come from? Maybe you're just good enough as you are, Dennis. And we would try to get to that. But there's no way he'd stick around all the way for that.
I'm curious because obviously you're working with Dennis Reynolds. He's a man. You're a man. You just gave a great example of how you would talk to him man to man. Do you think, Dennis, will he have better success if the therapist is also a man? Do you think he'd be resistant to a woman?
There's two ways you can play that. And that's something we think about when we're trying to match a patient with a clinician. Because we do talk about this. Like, we don't just hand people off. Like, who would this be a good fit with? And so I have certain providers in my office who are very attractive females who he might be lured in by, but they're hard asses who are in no way going to let him cross their boundaries. They're very conscious of their physical proxemics. They're never going to let him get too close. He's not going to get a hug at the end of the session. So they can dangle a little bit of mommy and a little bit of sexuality, just enough to keep him engaged, but he'll never get to. So that could work, because so long as if that's what keeps you coming, buddy, fine. You can look at my chest the whole time we're talking, but we're still going to talk about your child. So I've got some of those clinicians. But then the alternative would be, yeah, if he's sitting there with a man, maybe he can drop some of the act. Maybe he doesn't have to seduce me. So you don't need to do the Dennis system on me. I might even, like I said, play into his narcissism a little and be like, oh man, like, tell me what you do to work out. Like, give me some tips. I might give him a moment to feel, and that's something I often do with my men that I point out, and viewers can't tell because I'm sitting down and we're on camera or you're listening to me, but I'm a very small statured man. And so that's something that works in my favor, that most men loom over me when we shake hands when I meet you. So you don't need to feel like you need to prove your manhood to me. You're already more manly than me. You're so tall. So you don't need to show up in a way with me. And that might be useful for Dennis. But he's already a little more manly guy in the room. You're taller. You have a Range Rover. I don't. You have abs and I don't. So you win. So now we can stop playing this measuring contest.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Two ways you can go with it.
So, I mean, we looked at the grandiosity. We've talked about the rage, the manipulation, and obviously his relationships. We've also looked at some of the things that are underneath Dennis's history, the trauma, and some of the role that might play. And so let's bring it all home. Okay. So when we look at the psychology of Dennis Reynolds, how do you understand this guy? Ultimately, is narcissism the best explanation for what we're seeing?
No, you know what? I'm going to come back to my original statement. I stand by it. He is an insecure narcissist. And so that is the main factor. Some of these other things derive from other things you just said. But I think it's ultimately, I'm overcompensating. I don't feel great about myself, my situation, where I landed, maybe where I started. So therefore, I have to paint myself by this other brush to make myself the me that I wish I was. And in so doing, maybe it pushes people away. Maybe I have to step on a few people, but it's all about just taking care of little Dennis inside there.
Yeah, little Dennis. Well, Dr. G.
Hang on, one last thought before you wrap us up.
Yeah.
I do want to point out a fun trivia factoid, because I've watched this show since season 2 or 3, that Dennis is played by Glenn Howerton. And if you notice, Mac is the name of one of the characters, and his last name he actually changed it to Mac instead of whatever it was, Mac something originally. And then Charlie is played by a guy named Charlie. So why is he Dennis instead of Glenn? Because he knew they were writing such an objectionable character. He did not want anybody to think that this is based on him. So he intentionally made sure we're not calling this character Glenn, because there's nothing of me in the guy.
Wow. Okay, so I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that. And I can understand why.
Because of the implication, Yeah.
It was right there. And Dr. G, that's why we love to have you on the show. Thank you for helping me put the golden god on the couch today. And I don't know whether Dennis Reynolds would appreciate your assessment, but I definitely know he would give himself 5 stars. That much I do know. And before I let you go, Dr. G, can you just remind everybody, where can they find you if they want to see a bit more of you?
Yes. Yeah, the podcast that I do solo and with some guests is Therapy Without the Couch. That's also the book, hopefully coming soon. And you can find my Instagram, Todd Giardina. And I post reels and comments and some of this stuff we're talking about, cultural takes.
Go check them out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. G. And Alchemist, let us know your favorite Dennis moments. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like and, of course, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And until next time, Alchemists, stay curious.